Hi, Aditi. Good morning.
Good morning. Chitra, did you check the paper quality of the book I've sent you versus what you had? Is there any difference?
Hi, Aditi.
Hi, Archana.
So, let me change my background. So this background is from just nearby my house.
Lovely. It's beautiful. Is this how it's looking right now?
Yeah, and not now. This is last year picture, but now it will actually grow the leaves and everything. Yeah,
Okay.
it just started our spring now.
Which is the yellow tree? Do you know it? Is it laburnum?
I don't know, but it has that the leaves actually hang towards town. Maybe I should search what is that.
Just do a Google Lens. I think you'll be able to see it.
Let me check.
Chitra? Oh, Chitra's not there.
Hi, Aditi. Hi,
Hi, Swapna. Ah, okay. So today this girl Chitra is joining us, and I have a feeling. I'll just check with her. She's not done the half with the. Oh, she just lost internet connection. Okay.
They're called weeping trees.
Weeping trees,
Mm.
not
I
willow.
think there must be some name for it.
Not a willow. It's not a weeping willow because I've never seen a yellow
Yeah,
willow.
weeping willow tree. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know it turned yellow. Okay. So if Chitra is joining today, we can do another topic because she has not done the Buddha, and she can. It's like I said that day. It's a small class. I don't know what I was thinking. I ended the class at 8 o'clock. Just maybe I was too sleepy. So she can do the Buddha, and then we can paint the Buddha later. But let me just check with her if she's joining or she's not. So in the meantime, we have this month I was going to do objects in nature. So trees, animals like mammals, birds, and insects. But okay. So have we done trees before? We haven't done trees this year, no? I can share, we can do trees today. Then I'll just share the images with you. All right, so till Chitra joins, let's start with pencil sketching of the first picture. That's the trunk of a tree. It's all gnarled and twisted. So what I'll have you do is make a frame about that proportion. And in that frame, then I'll show you how to create the illustration as well.
Yeah, I'm back, Aditi.
Yes, hi Chitra. Okay, so I've shared these images on the group, and we'll be
Yes.
using those as references to draw trees today.
Okay.
So the first one, the first picture is of a tree trunk, which we are going to use pencil sketching for to draw. But I'm going to show you how to make a frame and how to then draw in that. So this it's a little study of how to also proportion a particular object within a particular scale or a frame or a size. So let me share these images with you and give you an idea of how you can make that frame. Now, when you want to draw a picture in the beginning of something that you even see, it's a good idea to take a photograph because we're carrying cameras with us all the time. And use the camera to scale and size the image, and use the fact that you're in front of the object to study details. So in this case now, if I were to scale, get the right proportions, I start off with making a square, because it's you just make a vertical line as wide as the horizontal part of the picture is. And then you realize that this is a so this would be if we see the rest of the picture, the bottom is about 1/3 tall or slightly more than half of this image, right? So if this is half, This bottom part till here is just about slightly more. But for our purpose, we could proportion this image as a 1:1.5. This would be 1 unit is to 1.5 units, and get a reasonably good sense of proportion over here. So this is the first mistake often that happens, is that we proportion our pictures wrong right from the start. We really don't pay attention to these things, and we would make sometimes a frame that is too long or too wide. So one of the first basic things about learning to draw what you see is to learn to measure things as close to accurate as possible. We can never get it 100% accurate unless we use a scale. And I normally discourage that, because that means that you're going to have to carry all sorts of equipment to wherever you're doing art, almost like a surveyor. So you can avoid that and still be able to do a good amount of scale and proportion work. So I'm now going to show you how to make a good enough frame with just the measurements that we have at hand. Now we are going to draw small pictures here, and all our pictures are going to be about this size through our A4 size page. The first picture we will make will be in pencil. And once you know how large you want the picture, you draw your frame accordingly. So now I want you to just observe how I'm drawing the frame, because I'm going to show you how to make a frame with rounded edges. So if this is our horizontal measurement, and I have made a line in the middle of the horizontal measurement. So there's a little gap here. This is the full width, but I've not drawn a line over there. And then I use the same pencil to measure. This is one. Again, I'll leave a little bit of a gap and draw a line all the way to the end, to this point. And then I'll also measure half. And this time, I'll leave a gap and make a dot. You eventually won't have to make a dot. So this gives us the length and width. And now I'll do the same on the other side. And you can always use your pencil to figure out where is your straight end, because often we will make lines which are slightly crooked. So to avoid that, use a pencil. You can use another pencil or a brush just to give yourself a guideline. Don't use this to draw the line, but just use this to guide you so that you can draw a line parallel to it. During your pencil sketching, if you make lines with a scale, they are usually so straight and clinical that your pencil sketching starts looking a little flawed. So I tend to avoid it. Now there are gaps between the lines at the corners, and this is the place where we can turn it on its side and make a nice rounded end. So this gives a slightly unusual look to your sketch. It doesn't always have to be straight lines. Now, let me share the image one more time. To create proportions of the object itself. Now, in the given frame, if I were to divide the frame into half vertically and half horizontally, from here now we get an idea of where the lines of the branches will go. So it starts off from the bottom right center of actually at the center line up to about, this is half, this is half. So you can draw a line that comes from the absolute center round and a little right of half of that rectangle. See, this is how you get the points for where to begin a line and where to end it. And you more or less get a good ratio of all the objects if you just keep in mind these things. And these are very objectively marked. The half points, objects like circles and squares. And if you can manage a particular size, then through that you can manage scaling well also. Now again over here, this is half point, this is half. So a little left, this point and this point is right on top of each other. And at about half point, the branch comes in. And then you just follow the shape that it makes. And it comes and joins somewhere here. And you get these broad strokes. And from here now you can build the texture. Okay, so I'm going to make a screenshot of this image and share it so you know where the scales appear. Okay, so in this now, I don't know why my thing is looking, that's okay. Angle is a little off. Now at this point, don't use an eraser. As you can see, even my frame is slightly crooked, but I'm straightening it. And I'll probably erase it later on, or I might not at all. Okay, now very lightly draw the vertical center, horizontal center. Check again and again that the proportion of your rectangles and pieces of your art are about the same size as in the reference image. And at any point you have the liberty to change everything, start everything anew. You don't have to stick with something that is mediocre. Mark all the half points over here. Half, because these are markers that help us to draw the trunk. Now, this is not really a vital requirement when you are drawing things in nature, because you will eventually learn to size and scale just by seeing an object. You won't need all of this measurement. But it's good to know how to also work with a grid, especially if you are looking at making, eventually next month when we make portraits, we will be doing that. Now, once you have drawn this, you can go back to the original photograph and start creating all the textures as you see them. And always start with the line that you see most clearly, or the texture that you can see most clearly. It does not have to start from the top or from the bottom or any place other than wherever you see a particular line. accurately. And even over here now, there are things like which line goes straight. There are some lines that go slightly crooked. This is also a place where you can make lines that are back and forth. This is normally the kind of line that I ask you to avoid making, back and forth lines. But here, that line is going to help you create the texture of the tree. So back and forth line, I would say, would be a line that you draw like that, back and forth. And all you have to do is replicate the texture. Wherever it is dark, you make the lines either darker or more numerous, more populated. And through this entire process, don't assume anything. Keep looking at the reference image through the entire process. Right up to the end, you're checking for information to either fill or to verify. So even after your illustration is mostly done, you still need to continue to see or observe the reference image and look for other details. Keep checking that the details that you have furnished are accurate. Because the more you illustrate, the more lines you make, the more lines you start seeing in the photograph. How are you doing, Chitra? Any questions? Okay, let me have a look. Okay. All right, nice. I think it's going well. Good. Okay. Do you have any difficulties you'd like to verify or need help with? So you're on mute. Could you unmute yourself?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
No, at the moment, No, but I'm very sure that if I practice this a couple of times, I'll have questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. All right.
Yeah.
This is a great exercise for practicing your pencil hand. Last month, we did a lot of pencil sketching, during which we practiced different kinds of textures. So, when you are shading something like trees, please notice that in some places they have smooth color, and in some places they have a very rough texture. So, since we are working with a tool that is quite malleable, try to zoom in, recognize some of the textures, and draw the lines accordingly. Now, this is something that you may not need to do or might find difficult to do in watercolor, but in pen and pencil, you can do these things. And all these little things like the dark areas between the folds themselves help make your tree look so much more convincing. Now, when you're shading this, as the rules go, check if you're holding the pencil too close when you're shading, because ideally you should hold it at least 2 inches away, so that without moving your hand too much, you can just move the pencil. Last week, I hit upon the science behind this. So let me try and explain. This is from probably our 8th standard physics, 8th or 9th standard physics, where remember studying something about work and uh, how much work can be done if you move a certain point of fulcrum from the edge away from the point of work, something like that. Do you remember it vaguely? I found it quite fascinating that it was so easy and objective and mechanical. So when you hold your pencil very close, you can make a short line. That is the purpose of writing. You make short, firm lines. But when you're shading, if you're holding the pencil too close in shading, you can maybe move your finger like that. But at some point, you are tempted to move your whole hand. And that makes your shading a little darker than necessary because you're still putting the force that is required for writing on the pencil. Now imagine if you can take your hand a little behind, where you are able to make long span lines by just moving your fingers. This line, we would have had to make maybe like this and then pull it down. So when you hold it this far back, at the angle that you see in on your paper also. You cannot put too much pressure in. So you tend to put much less pressure, and also the area covered is so large that you're able to make a very nice light shade throughout. And whenever required, you can come in closer to make in the details. Okay, so give that a shot. Now, if you're comfortable with this, and if you have shaded just a small section of this, we can move on to the next part, which is a pencil sketch of a tree. The next picture that we have is of a huge, it's not a rain tree, it's actually a tree from the temperate zone, but I can't tell which it is. It's got a beautiful structure, branching structure, and a lovely canopy on top. Now we're going to try and recreate this also in pencil. Now this image is horizontal, so we will convert this into a smallish image. Don't make it as tall as the present tree has been made. So here, using some kind of scaling like we have done before, we will make a horizontal rectangle. Will be a little, this is also, I think the proportion is 1:1 by 1.5, sorry. So about so much. And the same thing can be done. We can round off the edges. Now, if you try to make this rounded edge rectangle all in one shot, I can assure you that it'll take you years before you get the rounding accurately and the line correct. So break it up and make the rounds separately. Now here, the intention is to just replicate the textures of the tree and the direction of branching. So you can make just a border of vertical lines for the grassy base, that's the foreground. And then somewhere in the middle, you can start off with creating the branches. And these branches, eventually you can also shade dark. So you can create a shadow of the entire branch. So I want you to follow the shape of the tree. And first make the large branch. Now, when you're making this, look at the angles that are being created. This is, if this is the center of a clock, this branch is almost going horizontal. And do this to the best of your ability. Now, because the branches have all merged into each other, it's nearly impossible to tell at this scale which is what, which branch belongs to what clump of leaves on one end and which part of the trunk at the other. That is why we color the whole thing up and try to create a web-like structure. That's good enough for now. So I've made these basic branches towards all extremities. And there's one fat branch somewhere in the center, which looks more or less like this. And the more lines you make, the more you'll start seeing. Now, once this is done, just imitate the shape of the leaves. Here it's a up and down movement. This is probably some kind of pine or fir. So avoid making a canopy using a line that goes around like that, unless you just want to mark the area. For that, it's fine. But the texture should be a little reminiscent of what the actual tree might be. And if you look closely, or even if you don't, you do get a sense of how the structure of the leaves looks on the tree. If you look at the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth picture, which is a weeping willow, you'll see how even from afar you can tell that the tree is the leaves are drooping downward, and here you can tell that the leaves are pointing upwards. And you don't have to be a botanist or a science specialist or a tree specialist to see this. There's something in our eyes and brain that gives us this minor detail just by observation. Unless you are a specialist, you have no use for this information, or unless you're an artist, but you still do see it. And you don't notice it again until you have some use for that information. So trust your eyes. They're equipped to show you the right, give you the right information visually. So here I'm just making a squiggly line that goes up and down, not particularly in any shape beyond whatever I can make here. So they're just up and down lines, and I'm filling up the space in one medium dark shade. And the best bit about this is I can keep filling in areas where I feel there is foliage and go as far as I think I want to go. So always remember, when you're making an illustration, even if it is based on a real object, it does not have to look exactly like the real object. Otherwise, the whole point of illustration is lost. You need to be able to make your own contribution. And once this is done, in some places, you can now add some dark spots, extra branching. And if there's some shapes of the branches that you find unattractive, don't add. The shadows at the bottom will help to give your tree a slightly three-dimensional look. And this is a great study for how you can even apply color where you want to put the dark spots. It's good practice for scribble sketching. Okay, are you getting it? Now, all these sketches are considered as studies. So you don't really need to erase any of these lines because they're all there to help you remember the whole process. Any line that you erase is information lost. In some cases, that information is misleading. In some cases, it's good to have it because it helps you to um, to make your practice more robust. You use the same ideas. Like in this case, this line is evidence of my not being able to measure my rectangle properly. And this will remain in my memory if the line remains. And the next time round, I'm automatically a lot more cautious. The moment I erase it, there's a chance that I'm going to repeat this again. All right, so now the samples of trees that I've sent you, you can create all sorts of sketches like these, and that's great practice. You can also sketch using color pencil, and that can give you a different look altogether. Do you have color pencils, all of you? Any color pencils?
Yes, I have them in the house.
Okay. So, can you bring them out? We'll just try making one color pencil sketch also.
Mm. I have to go look for them, right? Aditi, whatever I've done up to now, shall I take a picture and put it on the group?
Yes, that will help.
Okay.
One second, give me 2 minutes to find my color pencils there. They've been runaways from me.
Can you look for mine too?
Okay, so I wanted a pair, my set of simple color pencils, and I've got my polychromos. So these can be a little more intense, but they're color pencils at the end of the day. So we'll have a green, you'll have a blue, and you'll have red maybe. So you can use a blue and whichever green you have. If you have a light and dark, try the light first. And we can use the color pencils to create or to sketch the third picture, which again is a slightly wider image. So maybe 1:1.25. So what we can do is take the same height as the first picture, but instead of 1 unit, we'll do a slightly wider unit. And in this case, because there's a sky on top, if either the tree gets cut off at the sky level or the sky extends, it's not a big problem.
Are we doing the third image?
Third image, yes, the tall tree.
Okay. I didn't find my color pencils. I think they're in my daughter's room.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I'll just do it in 5 minutes. Not too much. So here, I just wanted to show you a certain texture. You don't always have to use brown for the tree trunk. Again, I'm going to measure it according to our scaling. You can use colors like blue or green or even red for that matter, or a combination of all these to create the any kind of tree or texture of tree. And
I
then
just sent my sketch on the group. Sorry to interrupt.
no, not a problem. I'll just look at that as well. Now here also you can just use the color pencil. You don't make individual leaves as much as you create some kind of texture that brings to mind the texture that you see on the tree. So it can also be just vertical lines like that, or scribbles, rounded scribbles. So in this part, a study of those Van Gogh paintings is very valuable because he was able to distill the information into strokes so well. Many of these impressionists have done that. But Van Gogh especially, because he did use strokes. So here I'm going to now create rounded strokes. As you can see, my proportion has gone a little off and my tree has become bigger than I wanted it. A little bit of the sky is being eaten away. And to this, I can now add green. So when you're making these illustrations, the reason I keep telling you is, firstly, to work with photographs is because you can come up with your own textures and your own way of rendering. And that is again another vital part of learning art. One part is learning how to do what other people do, and another part is to have an opportunity to try out stuff for yourself. And you'd be surprised how many things you try out, you tend to like it, they become uniquely yours. That's another thing. If you land up making something that is your own, you should also be lucky enough to like it. And a lot of times I feel we become our worst critic, and maybe it's also possibly an Indian phenomenon where if we have not seen it before, then it's not valid. We have been brought up to believe that. It looks like nothing else nobody has done before, that means it's wrong. I don't know where that comes from. Originality is just not, we are not trained to see it, to seek it, to encourage it. We don't know what happens. We just get stumped by it. That's all. So if you land up doing something that looks different, observe it even more keenly instead of rejecting it. And we follow the same process. Now over here, I'm going to use a little extra color, but the texture remains the same. So I'm not trying to even out the texture. I'm just making it slightly darker, because otherwise we will not get adequate contrast in the picture. Yeah, so it's just scribbles. So even the rest of the image, I could make just outlines, silhouettes to suggest. So this is a very fun tool to carry around on a trip or a holiday, because then you don't have to carry all sorts of hajar paraphernalia, paper and paper. You carry water bowls and brushes and all of that. Within just a limited palette of colors, you can create a very nice memory and take it back home. All right. Now moving to watercolor. So before I show you something, I want you to draw a tree like you would normally draw a tree. Archana, I think you have done this part in the other class, right? 2 weeks ago in the Saturday class. Were you there?
No, Aditya, I was not there.
Oh, okay, fine. So great. Then what I want you to do is draw how you would draw a tree normally. And we are going to paint that tree. And it's pretty obvious that I want to show you how normally what you would think a tree would be, or you would draw a normal tree. There are certain flaws, and I'm going to show you a better way of drawing and painting a tree. So I want you to think about, despite all this practice that we've done, and if you can bring this into how you think a tree should be drawn, do it. I mean, you don't have to draw a tree like you used to draw before even this session was done. Okay, so take 5 minutes. I want you to draw a tree, and I want you to paint it in whatever colors you would normally paint it. So for example, I might make a tree like this. And then I will make a clouded shape like that. I'll just give you 5 minutes so you can paint it, and I'll come back. Archana, why are you erasing this tree? I don't understand. Throw that eraser out. Just because it's there, you're using it.
So you should know that this is how I do.
How you do this after such a long time also? I don't know.
Yeah, I know like I should not, but
I'm telling you, this is like, so there was a time when I was driving a gypsy, and the horn on the gypsy, it broke down. And because the model hadn't been made for a long time, that part was just not available. And our mechanic said, it'll take time. And he said, I'm going to have to look for a substitute that fits in or change the entire mechanism. So I think it was over 2 years before we could fix a horn onto that vehicle. So imagine driving in traffic like we have in India without a horn on your car. And I was used to driving like everybody does. Every 2 minutes you're honking and people are honking. But I was completely honkless. And I'm telling you, it was like a philosophical experience, because I had to just move according to how the traffic around me moved. I had no voice, I had no option, no opinion. And that was the best thing that could have happened to me, because I became a lot more aware. I realized that people do notice that I'm there. It's not as if I have to honk and make my presence felt. And I can now drive perfectly fine without using the horn at all, because you're a lot more attentive to all the idiots that are willing to come in your way. Wrong way, right way, speeding, just not looking, pedestrians, cyclists, everything. So in a sense, my own sensibility about driving has been heightened so much. And that was because I did not, it was like forced. I didn't choose to not have the horn. I just didn't have it, but I still had to drive. So my point of this anecdote is throw that eraser away. Force yourself into a situation that makes you uncomfortable, and you will find ways. If your eraser is around, you'll never find a way to not draw without it. And the whole point of this one is I want you to see how imperfect our trees can be. So don't erase this one. Now, when you're painting this, I want you to make a small swatch of the colors you use. Whichever colors, even if you're blending them, just make a color swatch. So I've used yellow ochre and burnt sienna for the trunk. And I will use sap green for the canopy. Okay. So this is how we would probably draw a tree if we were to draw, are required to make a tree for a chart or something like that. Now, the reason I asked you to write these colors is because now we're going to draw a tree that we're not going to use any of these shades. So no greens, no yellows, no browns, and yet we are going to create a tree. So when we are making a tree, there are a few things that you need to keep in mind, which are all going to be drawn from the practice that we've done before. So first and foremost, this kind of a straight, boring trunk is just that. It's just boring and it's mostly unreal. So if you want to make a tree look realistic or within a certain context, make it look impressive, it's not going to look good with this. This looks more like a caricature. Like this is like the emoji version of a tree, like you would make a smiley face. But in order to make a more realistic looking tree, we need to have branches and trunk shapes which are slightly more imprecise or slightly more varied. So say for example, if we start a tree trunk that is sideways, firstly, your line should not be too smooth. So make your line go a little rough. And you can make multiple lines. And also when you end the line as if the roots are growing out. There can be more roots which you can draw like this. Now, this is something that you can draw through observation. The base of the tree often is very thick, and even if you don't draw the roots, end the roots slightly spread out. As you go higher, you can make the tree branches thinner. They're thicker at the base and they are thinner as they go ahead. And the joints between the branches are often folds. So you don't have a V shape here. You would have one line coming ahead and folding in, or you will have even this, you could probably have something that's so. And at every point, the branches move away from each other at an acute angle, not a very obtuse angle, not at 90 degrees. And up to some point, you can make double lines for your branches. And after that point, you start making them just as single lines. But notice how over here now my branch size has become too thick. It looks very unnatural. So I'm going to have to adjust the branch that comes from below it to make it a little fatter so that it naturally accommodates the tree. Even this has become too fat. Maybe I can make another branch like this. It looks more natural. So many of these things about the structure of the tree come from observation. And we must learn to observe these things when we are in the company of trees. Now, I'm going to make a loose canopy of leaves, which is going to just be a scribble silhouette of tree. Now, obviously, this is a much larger tree than I had expected. I thought I'd make the whole tree over here, but it's not. The canopy is spreading out quite a bit. Again, this is just based on how I have made the base. And I'm going to imagine this tree running behind all our frames. So that it fills all of that up. And we can use the pencil to create a very nice rough texture, which can give us a sense of 3-dimension. Most of the shadows you will notice are on the lower side. And depending upon which side the light source comes from, the shadows will also be much denser on the opposite side or any one side of the tree, most likely. But there's no rule that says that's the case. It's all about how you want to observe it and what kind of illusion you want to create. So this scribble, often I've noticed that for beginners, for me as well, it used to be very difficult. I used to see these artist sketches where the scribble was so ununiform or so varied. But I would often get a zigzag line. I would get like a line like this at best. So I realized that you need some time and some skill to create a variable scribble or scribble texture. Some of it is helped by holding the pencil a little far away than normal and not drawing a very predictable line, like not drawing U-shaped like this branch foliage texture. All right. Now, as far as the painting is concerned, since we have decided we're not going to use any of these colors, what are the colors we are going to use? So let's start with this yellow. Yellow is a great base for any green, as you can see. We have lemon yellow. We have uh, gamboge.
Gamboge.
Yeah. Then we have the blues. So we have cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, and cobalt blue. And then we have the reds. We have this orange and we have scarlet. So we are going to restrict our palette for painting this tree to only these colors. Lemon yellow, yellow ochre, orange, scarlet, cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, and cobalt blue. So I want you to observe how I'm painting. It's not just the colors, but also how you use the brush while painting. As is with writing, often with painting also, we are obsessed with somehow painting in one straight line, one after the other. While I won't say that is wrong, that may not be appropriate for painting trees. So first and foremost, choose your brush according to the size of area you need to cover. If it is a small area like the trunk, I will use this brush. But for the canopy, I can use this brush or even a bigger, fatter brush. Now, don't paint with me, but I want you to see how I'm moving my brush around. I'm starting out with this pure lemon yellow color. And instead of painting like this, which you think you should be painting, I'm going to just deposit splashes of color with a almost like a non-committal hand. This is our first wash. And your first wash does not have to be uniform. That's the worst thing we can do because we are taking away that capriciousness of watercolor. Watercolor likes to be a little unpredictable. That's the whole beauty. So when you are applying paint, you don't feel compelled to apply it everywhere like you would do poster color. And if a little bit of the paint were to escape your boundary, it's perfectly fine. I'm now putting in a little bit of gamboge in a few places, but I want you to see how far I'm holding the brush. I'm not painting like this. So I want you to put color in patches and spread the brush when painting. What you need to do is control the amount of water and pigment in your brush so that you are just merely staining the paper. If you have too much water, then that will flow around a bit like over here. Right now, I don't mind it, but it might just create a big puddle. Now, while this is still wet, I'm going to bring in my blues. See this flow? This is undesirable. So I'm going to intensify my pigment since there's so much water. And even this pigment, I'm going to judiciously position in a few places. I'm using the point of the brush to create a semblance of foliage. So the texture of trees that we would want to make, we don't have to artificially create. I'm carefully painting around the branches so that I automatically get that relief there. And as the colors merge, I get my green. And what I also get is a very vibrant tree. I'm bringing in a little bit of cerulean blue. So this is just an exercise in opening up your color options when you're making the tree. This does not mean that you're not allowed to use green. It's just that that is not the only way to paint a tree. And this is now just the first layer. Okay. Now, once this is done, while this is still wet, I can use my orange to pull color down. So it looks extremely unusual to have orange as the color for branches, but it is extremely striking. And orange and blue are complements of each other or complementary colors, which means that they are on opposite sides of the color spectrum. So they tend to bring out the best in each other. Now, even this that I'm painting, I'm not going to paint it flat. I'm going to paint it in the supposed texture of the tree. So instantly, I get a tree feel. So it's not carefully drawing lines as much as with pressing the pen brush, I am creating a texture. To this again, I can, while it's wet, I can add scarlet. I'm adding the scarlet on one side so that it gives me a feel of shadow. So make no lines or put no color in places very casually. Don't just put a line over here. Don't put extra color. Make each application meaningful. All right, you want to give it a shot now? All right, do it slowly. And if ever you feel you have too much color or too much water or the wrong color, just wait and let it dry. We can, with watercolor, we can do a whole lot of changes as we layer up the image. But if you get nervous and you try to correct it while it is wet, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. Okay, so do it slowly.
Aditi, can you please tell me the colors once again?
Archana, are you holding the book with your left hand? Where's your left hand? Okay, yeah. Hold the book because then you get good anchoring to draw long span lines without going back and forth. Yeah, correct. Now stop, 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 stop. So when I say long span, do this, stop here. Lift your brush and then make the next line. And then lift it and make the next line. Because you need to show a little bit of the lines merging into one another. Is your left hand on the book? I can see the instability in your lines when your left hand is not on the book.
Okay.
Yeah, so hold the book, then you can really pull it out. It's almost as if the left hand is holding the paper while the color is being pulled out of this, like how you would pull wool out of a whole ball of wool, like that.
Aditi, will you look at this?
Yes, yes, I can see it. Okay. All right, nice, not bad. So your first layer, there's a lot of yellow, that's good. We can do a second, third, fourth layer also, which we will. So wait till the whole canopy dries and then we will add more color. Now the second layer or every successive layer, remember to paint something else or something less. So this is the broad structure or shape that we are painting. But within that, we are now going to put in paint in some other places. So it's not going to be the same all over because otherwise it dislodges the whole application of color. And it's just like you're moving color from one place to the other. You're not adding. So think of this as building a house of cards. You will have one layer which is really big, and then only in a few other places on top you will put the next layer, and then a few other places the next layer. So the broad base just supports the whole illustration, and everything else then starts giving it character. We can use the exact same colors again, or darker or more intense color versions of the same. So now here I have a very nice light patch inadvertently. It would be a shame if I cover the whole thing up, but I can just make a few textural strokes here with gamboge, and to that I can add a nice cobalt blue. And I'm also moving my hand quite randomly. So I'm not really looking at making leaves as much as the semblance of a clump of leaves together. And you have to do this carefully now. The first layer we planted quite organically, just put in a lot of paint and let it flow. And the next layer, now we have light and dark spaces. So here it's only advisable to make the details of the canopy according to the colors that have already fallen and found place there. You can freely mix the colors. You can, so I just want you to see how I work with the palette. I keep going into the palette with the wet brush. So this brush now has yellow, but I will go into cobalt blue and bring out some color here. So I'm not bringing it out into the palette every time. And the advantage in doing that is you get a much thicker color, and you also get an unpredictable mix of the shades that you have. Now there's too much texture happening. Can you see it's starting to look very monotonous? So I'm going to now make a little bit of flat painting. So repeat the kind of coloring that I did before. And depending upon the type of tree, you have to change the strokes. And after a few of these strokes, it's good to just wait and step back and look at the effects that you are creating. Now here, I'm going to use a little bit of blue, and automatically I get a nice either purple or a brown shade. And this helps me give more depth. I could do more texture, shadow. And again over here, don't make the same lines over and over. Keep changing. So contrast is a very important factor in a good illustration. And it could be contrast in black and white or contrast in color also. So contrast is the difference between the lighter shades and darker shades. If all the shades are very close to each other, then you don't have adequate contrast, like what's happened to my picture over here, because I've painted it just in one layer. Inadequate contrast creates very dull pictures. And unless that is your intention, dull pictures are not eye-grabbing. You can remove that by contrasts of different things. Like, for example, we have contrasting textures. This is very textured. This has no texture. So this in a picture together will draw attention. Like if I were to paint the backdrop over here, maybe I can just show it to you. I love doing these, pencil and paint. So this is just a gentle wash of cerulean blue. And this is absolutely no texture. I'm actually trying hard to not put any texture on this. It'll just be a flat flow of cerulean blue. This gives adequate contrast. This in itself can be a very interesting technique. Oh, I did it. I knew this was going to happen. And before we end, I just want to demonstrate one more tree, and that is the coconut palm, which is often a problem with a lot of people because we try to draw a coconut palm with all its fronds. So again, if you can just observe this, I'll demonstrate how to make the coconut palm, and then you can try it at, maybe you can watch the recording and try it with me a second time now. So our 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth picture is a coconut palm. I'm making a small version of that here. So just the canopy. It's got a huge trunk, which I'm not drawing all of, just the top part over here. And then instead of drawing the centers of each of those fronds and then drawing each individual leaf there, I am going to draw the shape of the canopy. This is a more organic way of drawing the coconut palm. Okay, so I've just drawn the overall shape, and now I'm going to paint it. Brush is gone. Missing? Okay. So here again, we can use similar colors. We don't always have to use a sap green or a reddy green. But this time round, I'm not used just a yellow. I mixed it already with cerulean blue. And I'm going to pull out the color with brush manipulation. So I'm going to press the brush in a few places and pull the line out. And I'm going to create broad strokes for even the fronds. And just with so much, we can really indicate that it is a coconut palm. You don't have to do more. And depending upon what picture you're making, this is about all you need to show any case. Say you're showing a picture of Goa or traveling on a beach somewhere and you have coconut palms there. This is all you need to draw to indicate that that's where you are. I could also make the trunk using blue instead of a brown, and then a red, a scarlet on one side to create the shadow and light texture. And this looks a lot more vibrant than a normal green and brown tree, isn't it? So the whole point of watercolor illustration is to make the pictures compelling because of the color. It's not enough to just draw accurately, because for that now we can even click pictures, but to be able to make the your presentation compelling is the whole intention. So feel free to mix around colors and have fun with them. You're capturing that kind of light fun in your painting. All right, any questions so far? Any observations about your work?
So today only I was actually, today was a positive day. It's almost like 20 plus.
Oh,
And from morning, I was actually sitting outside. I
huh,
was sitting in my backyard and I was just looking at trees.
huh, lovely.
Yeah, I can hear the breeze, and for a long time I sat around almost like I actually slept, or I have a beach chair. So
Huh,
I slept for like almost 2 hours and just looking around.
wow,
So
okay. So maybe do you have trees that you see from your beach chair?
yeah.
Yeah. So that's another thing. You could click a picture of how you see them when you're lying over there and make a painting of that.
Yeah.
Very nice. Cool. So wherever you are now, you can click pictures of trees. I think since all of us are in the northern hemisphere, right now would be something close to spring everywhere. So you would have trees that are flowering also, quite a few. And you can attempt to paint all of them. Many of them will be painted exactly like that. Do not attempt to paint individual flowers on trees. That's that's like trying to remember the name of every single person in your city. Not needed. You just clump them together into a color and just make that with a few dark spots, and that's good enough. All right. So I would encourage you to click pictures of trees in your neighborhood. Look for unusual looking trunks, something that is maybe a dead tree. Unfortunately, if it's around in the neighborhood, click that. Look for, don't go for details of leaves. Look for large clumps of leaves and try to see if you can tell the difference between trees just by looking at them from afar. And now that we have Google Lens, you can just go and click a picture and find out what the tree is. So you know that you were seeing it differently. And then try to notice why you could identify that the trees were different. I don't know if any of you has a background in botany or basic sciences, but I'm telling you, your brain and your eyes are equipped to see those differences. That is how we have survived. All right. So the more you observe, the better you will be able to translate that into trees. And then what you can do is make small size pictures in an A5 size or even an A6 size. So which would be, this is A4, you cut it in half, and A6 would be cut this half further. So a quarter of A4 would be A6. And make some silhouettes or paintings of trees in just that size. Don't try to make it a large painting. And then if you can, put it up somewhere in your room or in your house or just on the fridge, just little trees everywhere. Just try and do that so that you can, firstly, it becomes a very sweet artwork. Just putting those trees. Secondly, you will be able to observe how you are seeing things and how you are able to translate them on paper. All right. Okay. Okay. So,
Can you look at my pictures and tell me if there's any
yeah,
feedback?
yeah. Let me see.
I'll put
Yeah.
them on the group.
Yes, I'll see them right away. Yeah. Okay. So for the first sketch, you've got the shape, that is good. The shading will come easily if you start holding the pencil a little far away and let it flow. So I'm a little concerned from your line. Do you think that you are subconsciously holding your breath when you are shading? Because sometimes in the line it becomes like ECG monitor. You can see that it catches your your breathing. So
Okay, I
your
haven't really
heartbeat, not
noticed,
your
but
breathing. So just
yeah.
exhale when you're drawing. You need to relax a little bit. Second one is very nice. The paper that I see is very textured. So either you have drawn it very small so that the texture emerges a little more strongly, or the pencil has been held flat. So instead of that, in some places you can hold it more upright also. Just because you hold the pencil far away does not mean it has to be horizontal. So you don't
Okay.
necessarily hold the pencil horizontal. You hold it far away, but it can still have a certain point. And then if it starts eroding from one side, just rotate the pencil a little bit. There will be a sharp edge available
Yeah.
there. But I think you've got the shape right. So when I'm evaluating your work, what I'm looking at is whether your line is easy and in your control. If it's not, then you tend to restrict your movement and you try to make lines which are small. So I'm trying to see if you can allow your line to flow. And in some places, your line is going to behave like a toddler and just run out of your hand. Let it do that. It's not a problem. Okay. The same hand movement or the same lightness of hand is also required for the painting part. So even in painting, in the beginning, what you've done is pretty fine, but the hand is still falling heavy. So we will work on this in time, hold the brush a little far away. And if you can, in your spare time, try to apply paint in such a way. So imagine this is the paper. I'm not just applying paint like that in small bits or just in long strokes flat, not for watercolor. So I will be making some flat lines, some strokes like this, and all of this while the paint is wet. Some vertically, I'll be drawing the paint downward. And then in some places, I will shape it. So there's lots of stuff that we do with the brush. Maybe if you do one thing with the pencil or pen, we do 12 things with the brush. Sometimes we add pressure. Sometimes when you add pressure, the bristles will splay open. So then that creates a different effect. All of that is possible. So we will work on that. So these are the things that I'm looking at when evaluating: lightness of hand, confidence, ease of drawing. So this is part of the skill of your hand. The second part where your hand or drawing skills are not required is observation. What are you seeing, which you are translating? So as far as I can tell, you are able to see shapes properly and sizes well and proportions well enough, which is great. This half of the job is done. So knowing these headers helps you also to work on these different factors more and more. Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to share. I think that Buddha recording has not been shared before. I hope it is recorded, because if it is not, then Chitra, next week you're just going to have to watch us painting a Buddha. I'll be sharing the picture of the Buddha, but I can't recall if the recording has happened or not. But either ways, I'll share. If both are there, both will be shared. Okay.
Sure.
And if
Thanks.
during the week you could just watch that recording and make that Buddha picture, then next week we can all paint it together.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you so much for adjusting today. And I shall see you at the regular time, Thursday night for you guys, Friday morning for us on next week. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Swapna. Bye, Chitra.
Bye.